Hi, everybody. I'm Stacy. Nice to see all of you. I saw someone from Tampa. That's my hometown. So good to have you here with us. I'm here actually now in upstate New York. It's actually central New York if you're from the region. Golden Artist Colors makes QoR Watercolor. That's how you pronounce QoR, QoR. It stands for quality of results. We make that here in our factory in New York with our golden paints, as well as Williamsburg and Pan Pastel. So we have 4 fine art quote unquote paint lines that we create here. And I'm in our workshop space upstairs. If you ever have the chance to be in upstate central New York in our area and you want to take a tour, we do tours of the factory and you'll see actually where the magic happens. We're in our workshop space here at the factory where we have a classroom. So we've got this portion of it set up for live events, which is really a load of fun. Today we're going to talk about QoR. We'll do several little exercises and demonstrations, and you'll have some time to paint on some of the grounds, and we'll go through all of that. And I look forward to your questions, so please feel free to hit me up with as many as you've got, and I'll do my best to answer them. Okay. All right, so let's get started. If we could go to the overhead camera. Thank you. Just so you know, this is kind of a fun fact. Golden is an employee-owned company. It's an ESOP. We're 100% ESOP. So I'm here with Todd, who's producing for me today, and he's also a company owner of Golden, which is really exciting. And we really love what we do and the products that we make. And we have a team that can answer your questions anytime you have them about our products or how they work with any other products or any applications you're trying to do in your studio. They're available Monday through Friday at help@goldenpaints.com. So don't hesitate to reach out if you ever have any materials related questions. We're happy to be there for you. It's our thing that we do that we love. It's our passion. So if you're joining us live and you have these dot cards, there's 2 different types of dot card little kits. What we're going to start with is just a sort of paint out here in a moment. I'm going to walk you through it, but you want the one first that looks like it has more of a natural palette with this sort of burnt orange and this green at the bottom. So go ahead and take that one out and open it up. It looks like that. You saw how I used the palette knife to open it. They just tear the little seal and it'll work. Okay, so I want to get you set up to paint first. So we've got our first exercise. It's going to be using this palette. So go ahead and open that. If you have your little cards with grounds, we're actually going to do something with these now and then paint on them later. So you'll want that in front of you. You don't need the 3 tubes yet. You can leave those off to the side. So we'll be just starting with this. This will be our first exercise. And then we will actually, before we even get into that, we're going to prep these little surfaces. These were actually painted out for you ahead of time. And there's information on the back that helps you remember which one of these grounds you're testing on. We're going to get into this in some detail later, but what I'd like you to do as part of our prep is while your water's nice and clean, take your brush and just give these a little wash. And I'll explain why. And then once you've washed them, just take your paper towel and just sort of dab them dry. When these acrylic grounds sit for a little while, sometimes there's a little bit of a surfactant that comes up, and it just comes right off if you dampen the surface a little bit first and let it dry. If you just put this on fresh, you shouldn't have to do this once it's dry. But if, I don't know how long these have been sitting in our production studio, so I just want you to have a great experience. So let's go ahead and do this. If you prep surfaces yourself later on, it's always a good practice to just give them a little wash before you start painting. If they sit for a while, if they're fresh, don't worry about it. So I'm just using my brush to do this. If you want to use a damp paper towel, I guess you could do that as well. The nice thing about the brush is I'm kind of agitating the surface a little bit. I'm going to take another paper towel and just dab that. There we go. Okay. Yep, we have one more. You put those off to the side and they'll dry very quickly. While we're working, they'll be just fine. And then the third one. A little prep before the meal. How many people have, used watercolor often? And I wonder how many of you are just starting out. This is new to you. It'd be great to see that. New, oh, that's great. Okay, great. Several years. Oh, wonderful. We have such a variety. Yeah, I always feel like I'm learning too. That's wonderful. So we have a real varied group, which is fantastic. So those of you that have experience with other watercolors may notice some differences with QoR. We have a different binder than most watercolor. So QoR is actually a patented paint line, which is unusual. We patent our formula because we actually use a binder that is a non-traditional binder. We use a binder that's called Aquasol. Aquasol is a binder that has been used in conservation for infill painting. And the reason that conservators really liked this product and why they ended up using this binder was because of its flexibility and its clarity and its re-wetting. It doesn't tend to yellow or get brittle over time. So it makes a great binder for infill painting. And when we learned about this, we thought, wow, that would make a great watercolor. So our current director of research and development brought that in and actually did some experiments. And we found, that it actually was a spectacular binder for watercolor and didn't have maybe some of the traditional potential issues that you have with some traditional binders like gum arabic and honey, which can, have some, they're natural products. So they do have some variability and I can tell you from personal experience, I had a gouache with a honey binder that was in Florida, in Tampa, where I'm from, in my studio, and overnight the palmetto bugs ate the paint off the surface of the painting. So some things that are natural actually have some vulnerabilities, and we have watercolors that have been around for 100 years, 200 years, 300 years. So they do have a function. But the nice thing is that we found something that has a potential it has that potential to give you a longer life, and it is an improvement over some of those natural binders. So we were excited about that, to be able to bring that to the market. And that is the one thing that is different about our product. And when you paint with it, you might feel that if you're very experienced. Our paints tend to be very bright. Doesn't mean that every pigment is bright. Each pigment has its own characteristics, and we're going to explore that here in a minute. But they tend to be bright, and we also find that they're a little lively. Sometimes they have movement in ways that others don't. So it's good to experience it. So what I tried to set up for you today is the first exercise is going to experience how that paint moves. And you'll get to see that chromatic brightness as well with a variety of pigments. Okay, so let's go ahead and go to the overhead camera. A little personal story there, and I saw some grimaces. I know it's life in Florida. You have bugs. I know. All right, so I'm just putting a little drop of water on each one of these little dots of paint, and you're welcome to do the same thing. It will reactivate very quickly. With QoR, you don't have to scrub and scrub and scrub like some old style. I remember as a kid, those little pans you'd scrub and scrub and scrub. Those binders were really rough. Most professional paints are going to reactivate pretty well, but ours is exceptional in that way. So you have, going clockwise, cobalt teal, which is a granulating color. Granulating, for those that are new to watercolor, means that that pigment is a little larger and it's going to have a texture, which is another tool in your toolbox. Sometimes you want a little texture in your painting, so you'll want to go to those granulating colors. As I move across, I'll see that green gold is not granulating. if you have one of these cards, and if, Todd, could you zoom in a little bit here? I know it's hard to see. No, it's not gonna, you're not gonna be able to see it. That's okay, you can go back to the overhead. If you have a card, there's a tiny little G right next to these other symbols. One symbol, the first symbol, which is like a window. Oh, cool, you're zooming in, thank you. That one tells you the transparency. That's pretty universal. So think of it as a window. If the window is open and there's no shade in the window, it's transparent. If it's just got a little line, it's semi-transparent. If it's got a partial shade, it's semi-opaque. And if it's all blacked out, it's opaque. So it's, once you know the key, it's pretty easy to remember. The next symbol next to it has to do with whether or not the color is staining. And you know what staining means. Something stains your clothes, it gets in there. It's the same thing with watercolor. It's going to stain. Not the easiest to lift if you're trying to work subtractively, but they also serve a beautiful purpose in how they, in your painting, they have a different effect than something that's not staining. If you see that it has a little shade like the transparency, that means it's semi-staining. If it's solid, it's a staining color. If it's got a little slash, it's semi-staining. And then if it's not staining at all, we just don't put the symbol there. It's just not there. Okay, so as we go around the circle, I have cobalt teal, which is semi-opaque, semi-staining, and granulating. It's got a lot of stuff going on. Then I get to green gold, and that is transparent and semi-staining. That tells you a little bit about how it's going to behave. Then I get to sorry, can't say it, nickel azo yellow. That one is transparent and staining. So you know that that's going to have its personality is quite different than maybe the cobalt teal. Transparent pyrrole orange is the same. It is transparent and staining. And so is quinacridone magenta. And then we get to dioxazine purple, which is a semi-transparent stainer. So we're going to see how these all behave. And staining colors, you'll notice a difference between those and the granulating teal, cobalt teal. Now to do this, I want to show you both a painted swatch on dry paper and then wet into wet. So what we'll do is go ahead and load your brush with water, clean water. By the way, we recommended you had 2 water containers. And the reason for that is so that you have one clean and one for cleaning, that's dirty water. So I'm going to take that clean water and just paint half of your paper until it looks glossy. You don't want it to be matte because then it really won't do that wet into wet effect that we want to get here. Okay. So once that's done, I'll give you a moment to do that. I'll wet mine again. There we go. And I'm leaving my paper in this little card to hold it down. But if you wanted to try this and you don't have a dot card, you can just tape some paper down. All right, so I'm going to go clockwise for a couple of reasons. These colors are in a color chromatic order to where if my brush isn't perfectly clean, it doesn't ruin the effect. So I will clean my brush, but it doesn't have to be perfect. So I'm going to load up my brush with that cobalt teal. And I'm going to make a mark at the top, go all the way across, feel how that paint works for you. And then when you get to the wet and wet, you see how much it moves. It's just super beautiful. It's exciting if you like that kind of thing. Now that was a lot of water, so it's going to move. If I didn't want it to move, I wouldn't, have so much water. Now we're going to repeat that as we go around. So I'm going to do the green gold now. Remember, this is a transparent, let's make a little more water on that. A transparent color. You can see that as soon as you start moving it around. And that it's a semi-stainer. Okay. Move that in there. There we go. So pretty. Okay, and keep going. Nickel azo yellow. It's just a nice little sort of wet the palette. There you go. A little hors d'oeuvre. This is a beautiful color, this transparent pyrrole orange. If I were to take this color right here, not to jump ahead, but just to show you, and mix that with the opposing color, the cobalt teal, you get a beautiful neutral. It's kind of a, right now it's a little greenish, and I can make it a little brownish, but it's a neutral that has a little bit of texture. You can even get a little grayish if I go a little cooler. So just FYI, feel free to play around if you have a palette. All right, so keep going. Let's see the pyro orange. I'm going to paint that one out. And it's a transparent pyro orange. Beautiful. Now the quinacridone magenta. A little bit more water. There we go. If you notice that it's kind of dry and it's tugging, that means you need a little bit more water. It should glide. For my new folks. But then if it's like really sloshy, you might have too much water. So you have a binder, which is Aquasol. You have the pigment, which is your color. And your vehicle, what makes your paint move, like a vehicle makes you move, right, is your water. So I'm adding that vehicle in here. Now this color looks like black. People sometimes use it as a black. But when you see it hit that water and that wet and wet, you'll see that purple come up, and it's really pretty. Gorgeous violet color. Okay, was that satisfying and fun? Super, yeah, good. Easy and pretty. And you can see how chromatically bright these are. And as it dries, here's my dry example. You can see those colors are quite bright. Watercolor does tend to mute or become less intense as it dries. So being able to retain that much brightness is a lovely characteristic of this paint line. Okay, I'm going to move my wet stuff out of the way. And you can paint while I get set up for the next thing. Now we're going to mix color, which is super fun. One of my favorite things. All right, so if you're ready, you can go ahead and, if you have this palette, go ahead and open up the other one. It's the one with the very bright colors on the card. You open that up, and the first color up top would be Diarylite Yellow. That's how you know you have the right one. I'll move these guys out of the way. Set this up here. This is my dry example. Now for this, we're actually, just a little heads up, we are going to be using this Pissarro Still Life as a, it's just as a resource to sort of get some color matches that are close. We won't be exact because we have a very limited palette, but we'll get very close with this limited palette. I would say I tried to keep the mixes simple. You can add more to them, and I'll talk about that as we go if you wanted to get closer. But theoretically, when I did the test for this, you could do a painting of this little still life. You could copy this Pissarro and get in the ballpark with the color just from the sample palette. Okay. So it's fun to mix color. You'll start to see here in my dry sample that you get, depending on how much water you put in your paint, you will get a variable, a variation in your value. So as you wash that color and you add more water, you get thinner, sheer layers of pigment. You can change the value or the lightness and darkness of a color. And when you're mixing with a granulating color, like we did here, you'll even see the textural change, which is really exciting. So I really wanted you to be able to experience that with QoR and get a sense of how that feels when you're color mixing. So let's get started. We'll start with some simple ones, okay? All right. So I'm going to wet my little dots again, and then we'll go through the palette. Let me see the best way to do this here on camera. All righty, there we go. Just wet them. A little bit more. There we go. Okay. Trying to be controlled and not put too much water on there. All right, so this palette that you have, we'll start at 12 o'clock. This is Diarylite Yellow, which is a semi-opaque color. you notice that there's no, if you have the card, you'll notice that there's no indicator for staining or granulating. That's what I was talking about before, that if it doesn't have it, it won't be there. Then we have Pyrrole Red Medium, which is a semi-opaque staining color. Quinacridone Violet. We had Quinacridone Magenta in the other one. This one's a violet. It's quite lovely. And this is a transparent stainer as well. Then we have Ultramarine Blue, which is a semi-transparent, semi-staining, granulating color. Then we have Chromium Oxide Green, which is an opaque granulator. And Transparent Red Oxide, which is a transparent, it's in the name, staining granulator. That's an unusual combo. It's a really, really beautiful, versatile color. Okay, so let's go ahead and start doing some mixtures. And I think what we'll do first is try to mix to a color that could be utilized as a local color in these, let's call them apples. They look a little orange in the picture. It looks like a sort of a blue-orange color relationship in here, but they're apples today. All right, so what I'm going to do is start with the obvious, and I'm just going to do a red and yellow mixture. And I'm going to mix here in this little well first. No, I'm not. I take that back. I'm actually going to swatch out on my paper so I remember what I actually mixed. So I'm going to just do a little swatch here. Then I'm going to put some yellow in the center, rinse my brush, pick up a dab of water, and then come back over here, swatch out my red, which is my Pyrrole Red Medium, and then I'm going to mix them. And you see I get a really lovely orange. Okay, now that orange, I'm going to go ahead a little bit more yellow, as if I'm going for something in these like little bit hotter spots. And it can, as you see when I paint this out, full strength, this is really chromatic, super bright. I'm just going to pick a little water up and stretch that mixture a little bit so I can get a little wash and see how that dries. If I get too much water, I can blot my brush and pick some up. So I can see that I have this really nice sort of lovely orange color. Put a little bit more in this end here. Now, if I wanted to create some of these more neutralized, more brownish tones, and I have my orange that I made here, really bright orange, I can play around with some of these other colors, kind of putting in something that's a little bit of the opposite of the orange. So I'm going to just take the very tip of my brush and just pick up the tiniest amount of the ultramarine blue. And then I'm going to mix that in my well. Tiniest amount. See how that tiny amount went brown really fast? So I can pick up a little bit more red and yellow and adjust it if I want. That was a lot of red. There we go. So I can, depending on, you know, how dark you want this color to go, you can adjust it. But when I look at my, what we're calling apples today, that looks like some of the color I see in there. So I'm going to go ahead and swatch that out and give myself a little information. So I know that this is how I got to that color. Here you see I added more blue in that other example. Both are fine. And then I'll give myself the note. This was blue. So I know that this plus this equals this, and then this plus this equals this. Nice. If I were to stretch this out a little bit, I might start to see the effects of some of that blue and some granulation, but there was very little, so it would be very subtle if you could see it at all. Okay. Let's make some wine color. It's a really deep purple, but I don't have that diox on this palette. I could cheat and go to my other palette, but let's try to mix something that's going to get me in the ballpark. Now, I'm trying to get you guys to use all of these colors. You could probably make this color a few different ways. So we're going to try to do this with in a way that we engage with all of these. So Let's do that. Let's go ahead and start with the obvious. This time I had blue here first, but this time I'm going to go around this way. Quinacridone violet kind of looks like wine already, so I'm going to put that down first. But the wine I see in this picture is much darker. So I'm going to add some of this ultramarine blue to that color. And look what that does. It gets me to a really different violet. That feels like wine. Really dark. And I don't know if, you'll see it on your palette if you're mixing alongside me, that it really turns to this lovely purple. So I'm going to go ahead and swatch that here and then give myself the note of the blue in a moment when I have a clean brush. Now, if I were to let this out with some water, I would see that that's very purple. If I were trying to get this just right, I might even play with adding a tiny bit of the transparent red oxide in here. And it would warm it up just a smidge to where it gets that sort of more muted purple color. Still dark, but it's a little bit more muted. So let me give myself the note. This was quinacridone violet plus ultramarine blue, and that could work. That could be enough. But if I wanted to go a little bit more muted and get that to look a little deeper and warmer, I could add this transparent red oxide, but just a smidge, just a touch. Okay, great. So that's how I got to that color. And now I'm going to just pull that out with a little water so you could see what is the undertone of that color. There you go. You can see what it looks like with the white of the paper shining through it. If it were very transparent, that's what it would look like. Washy.
Stacy, I have a question.
Sure.
Do you know what type of paper it is you're painting on?
Yes, I
That's
do
in this.
actually. In these sets, we have Hannah Muley, 140-pound cold press.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so let's do another mixture. If I were to pick a tube of paint to start with for this vase, however you want to say it, I would probably start with maybe like a manganese or a cobalt, but we have an ultramarine blue in our palette. So how can I get close? It's doable. So let's try it. I'm going to start with, whoops, let's clean out that little well. Just wipe that out. There we go. Do you enjoy color mixing as much as I do? I think this is so relaxing and just the most wonderful thing to be doing on a Thursday at work. All right, so I have the ultramarine blue. I'm going to put that down in the well here because I'm going to mix right into that. And I'm looking at all these different colors, and I'm going to try to get to something that's in this little dusty range. It looks like a blue vase that's been sitting there a while. It has a layer of dust on it. So I'm going to go ahead and go towards something warm to see if I can neutralize this a little bit. I'm going to jump over to this transparent red oxide. I'm going to paint that out. And by the way, if you want to take a moment to take a little bit of water on your brush and just see what that transparent red oxide looks like when you let it out, it's a very pretty color. And you can see that up here, I really could have used this to start my oranges, right? I mean, that color has a lot of range. It goes from brown to this almost the same color we have right here. But what fun would that be when we got to mix it? Okay, so I'm going to take these two colors and put them together until I get something kind of, look at that. It neutralizes it. It's grayish, right? So I know that that brings down the intensity of my blue if I were to add more because it has that grayish color in there. And that's starting to look a little bit dusty. Let's see what that looks like if I wash it out. So if I put that color down, I can tell you already it's probably a little too gray. I'm going to add a little more blue. Now I'm going to put that here. Grab some clean water and wash that out. That's very Payne's gray, isn't it? It looks like a Payne's gray. So this is still bluer. I'm going to work a little blue in here. Okay, now I'm starting to see a dusty blue. It's not quite the color I see there though, so I could adjust this. If I wanted to go an extra step and I wanted to get it more towards that, it's got a little bit of a yellow-green bias, I could sneak in the tiniest bit of this diarylide. Oop, too much. A little bit more blue. If you run out of blue, we have tubes of blue also, so you'll be all right with the ultramarine blue. And then I can wash that. Oops, not quite enough. It's all about adjusting. I don't want to get too green though. We'll let it be green-ish because it's getting closer to the actual color I'm trying to get. There we go. So that slight adjustment gets me a little bit closer to this like grayish color in here. You see on the details, this kind of blue, like right in here. If I were to put it on a little heavier, be a little darker, a little grayer, because I was able to neutralize that and add more yellow to it. And it's all about going back and forth. One thing you can see in this wash is you start to see the granulation of that ultramarine blue in that color. It's really nice. Okay, let's do one more set of mixtures. And this is to get into the family of colors that are on that back wall. Okay. We're going to go ahead and start with our chromium oxide green. Chromium oxide green. You can see how opaque it is right away. I'm going to put that in my well. And then I'm going to go back to this transparent red oxide. Pick up a little bit of that. Swatch it so I don't forget. And then let's do a mixture. It should turn like a brown kind of color. And I think when I look at that background, it's not this warm. It's a little cooler. So I'm going to add a little bit more green. There we go. It looks kind of close. I imagine when I pull that back, I can see that undertone. That really starts to look like some spots in that wallpaper. So I'm going to go ahead and swatch that out. I can leave myself a pretty heavy opaque area if I want, and then I can do a wash next to it where I add a little water. And I can see that I'm getting to some of those muted tones that are in the background over here. And I can adjust that. I can play with adding a little cool, a little warm, and get a variety of those colors in the background. I think I had too much on my palette when I did this one. I kind of want to go back to that real quick. See if I can get you in the ballpark of the sort of muted color I wanted there. Ah, there we go. That's kind of where I was trying to head, but we're close. There we go. Just put that out there without such a wash. There we go. That's these areas. And the way I got there, just so you know, was this color plus this color, and then the yellow equals that.
Stacy,
Yeah.
which color did you just add to the green?
So just now this part or down here?
Down there.
Okay, so I
Yeah,
have chromium oxide green, transparent red oxide,
gotcha.
and that gets you this. And then up here, where I went backwards, because I wanted to this was such a thin wash, I wanted to show you a more dense layer of pigment. This was the ultramarine blue, again, the same transparent red oxide. And then I added the diarylide yellow, and it neutralized it to this sort of bluish, greenish, gray color.
Perfect, thank you.
You got it. All right, did you enjoy mixing? I see some people are still working. That's good. So color that looks really bright and chromatic can actually, when mixed, be very subtle and very muted. So you have a huge range depending on what pigments you choose and how you mix them, how intense, how much pigment is in your paintbrush. So whether you have a lot of water or a little bit of water, all of that is going to change the dynamic, whether it's a textured pigment as a granulator or it's a stainer. As these dry and set up, look for texture. See, do I see more texture in this color? And then check it. Did that have chromium oxide green in it? And you'll notice that there's a little difference. And if you're new to watercolor, that's something that watercolorists definitely pay attention to when they're building out their toolbox, or those different, characteristics. All the pigments have different personalities. So, okay, we're going to transition to something else. Thank you. We can put those aside. If you're still painting, you can listen and catch up or finish later. It's up to you.
We do have
Next.
a question,
Yeah,
Stacy, while you're
sure.
transitioning here.
Yeah,
Um,
perfect.
yeah, so Adriana is asking, well, she
Mhm.
says, I put some of my QoR ultramarine blue tube in a half pan, and it's
Mhm.
been sitting in the open for a week, and
Hmm.
it's still a bit moist. The other two colors are dry. Is that okay that the ultramarine blue is still moist?
Well, that is unusual that it would be so different. I would wonder how moist. If it's just a little sticky, I think, if it's hardened to where it's not wet and it's a little sticky, you might want to just try picking a little bit up with some water. I wonder if maybe some of the binder went to the surface. It's an unusual thing for that to happen. I would also wonder about your environment, but you're saying the other two dried. So here's the thing. As much as every every precaution is taken when we make our paint, we're very careful. We do a lot of testing. Nothing's perfect in life. So if something were to be an anomaly, we'd want to hear about it. So we'd invite you to send us an email at help@goldenpaints.com. And if there's ever, we have a product guarantee on our products. So if there's ever something that is truly wrong with the paint, we replace it. It doesn't, to me, I wonder in your case, if you took a brush with some clean water and just sort of agitated the surface just a little bit and then set it aside to see if that resolves. It may just be you had a little, have you ever seen a watercolor when you go to squeeze it out and a little bit of the binders at the head of the tube? Sometimes that's just something that is hard to avoid, especially as things ship and they go through temperature changes and all of that. Sometimes a little binder gets ahead of itself. And if you had a little extra binder, maybe that was at the top, and that would be sticky if it were not, if it were just kind of on its own. So try that, and if that doesn't work, then send us an email, because if it's truly not setting up, that's very unusual, and we'd like to know about it. So,
Okay,
okay.
yeah, she does say, yes, I saw that in the UV tube. The binder got out first, so
Oh,
maybe
then
that's
that's
what it
probably
is.
all it
Yeah.
is. If you just wipe it, that's probably going to take care of it. Just clean brush and, do a little paint out. It'll be fine. All right, awesome. Any more questions?
Susan is just asking again what the binder is called.
Its binder is Aquazol, and you can look it up. It's something that is out there, and you can even fact check me. There are conservators that have used it. It is, I even think some of the raw material paint companies that just sell paint parts for people who make them, they list Aquasol as well. We sell a watercolor medium, which is mostly our binder with, binder alone is not the paint. The paint is a binder, humectant, some things that balance the paint so it sits well in a tube, but it's mostly binder and pigment. Um, so the binder, that's just the pure binder package, is called Aquasol. Yeah. Okay, you ready? You have three different grounds here, and this is modernity. I mean, I know watercolorists, that's a relationship between the pigment and the paper, and that is one wonderful substrate to paint on. But as we think about um, different opportunities to stretch our creativity, there are some. What's interesting is that acrylic preparations vary in absorbency and tooth and texture. And those variations give us opportunities to actually expand the media that we can put on acrylic grounds. So what's really fun to think about is if I really like watercolor and I like the flexibility of this rewettable paint that I can go back in and rework, but then I want to display it maybe on a canvas or on a panel. There are ways to do that using acrylic grounds. So we have 3 different types, and they all have different personalities, just like there's different types of paper. These are not a replacement for paper. They will never behave like paper. So I thought it would be good for you to get a sense of how they do behave to see if it's something you're into. So we can start with watercolor ground. That's the one that's the most smooth. You flip it over, it has a description of it here on the back and the title in case you just, need to find it and you need that little extra help. There we go, it's watercolor ground. It doesn't have a lot of texture, but you can feel that it's toothy. So what I thought would be fun and easy, and if you're very skilled, you can, do as much as you want here. But if you're brand new to painting, we're just going to do something very simple. We're going to call it a landscape seascape. It's just basically you're going to find a horizon line and you're going to paint above and below the horizon line, however you like. And it's just the point of this, though, is for you to experience the paint on the different grounds. This one's cold press ground. We'll get to it in a moment, by the way. So this is a watercolor ground. For me, I'm just going to start this one, I think, with some ultramarine blue out of my tube. You can also use your cards if you don't want to use the tubes. This is, again, that wonderful granulating blue. And I wanted to make sure that you had a few different textures to try on these grounds because a granulator may look different than a stainer. So I'm just going to go ahead and pick a horizon line. Very simple. And I'm just going to wash. I guess my water dropped. I'll wash below that line. There we go. And you can see how the paint moves on that surface. There we go. Nice sharp line there. It's going to absorb differently than it would on paper. Differently isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes differently is a really fun and interesting thing. I'm going to take some quinacridone magenta that I have in my little tube here. Right, yes, I do have magenta, and some of this nickel azo yellow. And I'm going to mix them to make an orange.
Stacy, what type of brush is used to apply the ground?
Oh, that's a great, great question. So any brush that you use to apply like any acrylic, but since, if you want to get a really flat, even application, you can dilute the ground slightly with water, and then you can brush it out with a soft brush, usually like a nylon, not a bristle, something that's going to be very gentle and soft, and you get that softer mark. If you had a bristle brush, it'd leave you a lot of streaks. So you can keep playing with this as much as you want. I'm kind of loving that fresh color and that minimalist, and I can really see the little blooms because I put a lot of water in there. A little bleed where the colors touched. This gives you a sense of what those edges look like on this ground. It's different than paper, and I kind of super love that. Something else to know is that on an acrylic ground, lift is a little easier than it would be on paper. So I'm actually going to reach across here. Sorry, stick my hand right in the camera there. I'm pulling out my little demo from earlier. I'm going to slide this up and try to lift some of these colors that have dried, just some water. Some of them lift better than others. If I made a mistake, you can see those stainers really are in there. If I try that on this, granted, it's maybe not a fair test because it's not the exact same color, but they tend to lift a lot easier on the acrylic grounds, which can be, oh, look at that, that's neat, which can be a benefit if you're trying to work subtractively. so that you don't have that kind of lift with paper. All right. Are you enjoying painting? I see a lot of really engaged people. So I could go back in. Let's see. Not sure what I'm doing. I'm just having some fun with this, giving you a little time to paint, and then we'll hop into the next ground. Okay. Take a little bit more of this blue. I'm going to mix it with some of the quinacridone magenta. Just to write a deeper purple color. Have a little, see what that does. Okay. The nice thing is if you're not done now, you can always come back and keep reworking it. That's the beauty of watercolor, is that it's not, once it dries, you can go back in and rework it again and again. I really get excited when I see these sort of tide lines and really interesting staining effects on these grounds. I think that that's one of the unique characteristics of this material, is that it really does have a different personality than paper. So maybe for you, may not be for you. It's a great time to try something new. That rhymed.
Patricia's asking.
Yeah,
Patricia's asking if we are painting on wet on wet.
you can. What I did is I did paint in wet into wet when I added that, sorry to my head there for a minute, when I added all that water. Now, if I wanted to not paint wet into wet, I could start with a wash and then let it dry and then come back and paint again on top. And then it would be, you know, not wet into wet, it'd be wet over dry. To an area over here that's a little drier. So if I wanted to go into here, I don't really have a thing to paint, but I'll just show you a line. You know, this is actually still a little wet. You can see how it's bleeding. Todd, I don't know if you can get in there. Yeah, there we go. So let me see if I can make a mark closer to the camera so you can see. This feels like it might be dry, but it's maybe slightly cool. Oh, there, that's better. This area is drier. So I can, you know, go right on top of this, dry over wet. And honestly, you know, I did wet over wet just to show you all these all of these different behaviors that the paint will do. They look differently on the watercolor ground than they would on a piece of paper, but you most certainly can go back and paint over that and get those crisp lines if that's what you want. And also rendering, you know, you can go in and model some areas. I'm not really going to, let's see. I can just draw a little circle on here real quick. You can go in and, you know, really work on shading and so how does it try to go too fast?
Yeah, Amelia is also asking if the color lifts easier on the watercolor ground, what happens when you glaze another color on top of it?
Well, that is a great question, and I'll show you when this dries, okay? You have to work fast. It will glaze, but you got to do it quickly and then don't keep scrubbing. So we'll let this dry and then we'll come back and we'll try to glaze it. And I don't really have a great glazing brush with me right now, but I can do it. I believe in myself. Okay, so we'll let that dry and then we'll do a glaze over it. You can see it. Okay, so this next one is really different. This one's called light dimensional ground. This can be scraped onto a surface really thin, like a really flat you know, gessoed, sanded gesso texture by just using a scraper, or you can put this material on thick like frosting. This is the same material. This is actually stained with watercolor. So that's light dimensional ground as well. So you can go super flat to super textured with this material, and it is still a watercolor ground. So that can maybe break your brain a little bit because it's a little hard to imagine. Okay. So this one might even have a tool mark in it, and you can use that in your painting if you want. The tool mark is actually intentional when we make these to show that this product has that texture. But you can put it on in a way that it doesn't show the tool mark. If you like the way this looks, but you want it flat, that's totally doable. Okay, so let's play again. I'm just going to pick up a color and wash it across. I'm just going to go ahead and paint it on, and then I'm going to do a wash below because the wash really reveals some behaviors. And I like to show that because we're trying to see what this ground texture looks like and how that paint moves. If for some reason you're painting this and you're noticing that the paint is parting, mine is not, which is good. That's what we're trying, when we wash the surface at the beginning, the reason we wash it is to prevent that. So if yours is parting, then maybe you missed a spot in washing it. The way to get around that is just scrub it a little and then put your paint down. It goes away. It doesn't hurt your paint. It's not a big deal. Okay, that looks like sunshine. Love that. Okay. Let me go with this. I want this to just go right in there and be crazy. So you have those three little, if you're joining us live, you have those three little tubes. You can mix their triad palette. That was intentional. It's a red, yellow, and blue, and they mix well. So you can get some nice mixtures as you play around here. What I just mixed was all three of them to get this brown. And my little, I don't know what buildings or trees in the distance, whatever, just playing. Now, I tell myself when I'm doing these, you're not making art, you're just having fun. Right now, just having fun. Okay, so that will dry, and then for the person who had the question about glazes, when that dries, I'll put a glaze over it. For right now, this one might be dry, so I might, still a little cool. I actually don't think it's ready. I was getting excited. I thought I was going to do that glaze. Not yet. Now this has a really different texture. You'll notice right away how different it is.
Do you use the same pigments with watercolor as you use with golden acrylics?
What a good question. Most of the time, yes. Every once in a while, there'll be a pigment that is becoming more rare or has been discontinued, hard to find in the market. And then what we have to decide at Golden is where does that pigment have the most, where is that pigment most important? So if that's a pigment that is, say, I can't think of an example right now, but if that pigment had a characteristic that was very special to QoR, but it really didn't make much of a difference in an acrylic or oil binder, we would preserve that, what's left of that pigment for QoR. So there's some, you know, a few examples of where our pigments are not exactly the same, but overall, yes. And we are very fastidious about the pigments, try to choose the best that are out there that are the highest quality and most pure. So pigments are a big topic around here. But yeah, I'd say most of them are the same, 99.9%. Don't quote me on the math.
Mhm.
Okay, so I hope you're having fun painting that. I'm not ready to glaze this, but I feel bad I didn't do much on this one. So I'm just going to put one more color here and then we'll glaze at the very end. Just going to put a little magenta at the top. We're going to call this unfinished. Mm. And I think it may not look very good, but I think I'll glaze a wash of the blue over the whole thing when we're done. Okay. So that's light dimensional ground. The whole point of this is for you to experience what that texture feels like under the brush and how the paint behaves. I used some staining color here and here, but when I mixed all three of them together, I got some of that ultramarine blue, the granulating color in there. And as it starts to dry, you can see that some of that granulation looks like these little gathered pigment particles, but it's different than the texture of the light dimensional ground. So when it dries, see if you can tell where the granulate, if you did use any of the ultramarine blue, see if you can see if that's different than your staining colors on that ground. Okay. So let's do one more and then we'll go back and glaze. Hopefully these will be dry. If not, I can, you know what? I can glaze over the painting I did before the event if they're not dry. Okay, so here's the last one. This is cold pressed ground. So this one has the visual look of a cold pressed paper, if you will. It has these sort of fibrous texture inside of this acrylic ground. You can actually knife this on and leave the edges really raw, almost like a deckled paper. It can look really beautiful like that. I can show you what these look like in the container before we get this one started. This one is the cold press ground. So I actually will see if I knife that out for you. I have a panel right here I can do it on. So cold press ground looks like this coming out of the container. It's thick, right? Super thick. And I put it on a surface and get this out. I could take my palette knife and I can just let it be really like a handmade paper. Like I just took the pulp out of my bath and laid it out to dry. I could leave it just like that if I wanted to. I could also take a scraper, which I don't have here, if I'm on a canvas, and scrape it down. And if I scrape it down, it can get fairly smooth. I'm going to take a little water to this and show you. This can get pretty smooth if you wanted it to. Let me just clean my knife and do that again. There we go. You got that, Todd? You're starting to see how smooth that can be? There we go. So I can get this to be pretty smooth, like a very, very pressed handmade paper with just a little bit of texture. Now, when acrylics dry, acrylics have water in them and they dry, they shrink by about 50%. That doesn't mean this whole thing gets 50% smaller. It just means it shrinks down. So if something looks a little thick, it's not going to look as thick when it dries. Again, just like the light dimensional ground, I can put this on like this, and that could be part of my watercolor painting. All your acrylic grounds can be applied to anything that acrylics would stick to. So not just canvas, but you can also put it on plexiglass. You could even put it on your watercolor paper if you want to change the absorbency or the texture of the paper. So before we paint this one, I'm actually going to show you what that looks like. I have buried under here a little piece of watercolor paper. And on this piece of watercolor paper, I have some stripes of the cold press ground. And this is the same for all of these grounds. So it's not just the cold press ground, all of the watercolor, the QoR watercolor grounds. If I were to take let's see, I'm going to take this ultramarine blue. I'm going to load up my brush with some water and ultramarine blue here. A little bit of that muddy color in there, but that's okay. I'm going to go across this to show you what this looks like. So this is the blue across a piece of paper that has the cold press ground on it. So you can see the difference between the cold press ground and the paper. And, you know, a little while ago, one of my colleagues and I were at an event and we met an artist who used this in her paintings. She would stencil, you know, some of these figures that she was working on. She'd stencil patterns in the background with our grounds on the paper and then paint her portrait over the patterns. And her intent was to change that texture and absorbency so that the patterns would create this subtle layer of information that was different than the painting on top. So if you can imagine, she prepared her painting with she prepared her paper for the painting with patterns stenciled in of the acrylic ground. So she had areas of paper and areas of ground, and she did her painting on top. Just the change in the texture and the absorbency made those patterns have a presence in the painting. So these can be used in many different ways. They don't have to just be a ground. They can be integrated, and you know that your watercolor is going to adhere and not have a problem. So that's another fun use to think about. All right, so now we get to paint on this one, which is the cold press ground. This is the roughest one of the three. So if you have very expensive brushes and you do a lot of scrubbing, you might want to use a different brush for this, because a lot of scrubbing with your best brush on a big surface over a period of time will wear down the brush. So okay, so same thing. We're just going to create a horizon line and see what the paint does. And then, of course, this is yours, so you can have fun with this later if you like. And I'm going to go with a sunny, feeling sunny today. Just all these sunny colors. I think I'm going to have to add some blue here soon. Let me go up here. There's a lot of
Stacy,
hills. Go ahead.
if you need to, can you thin it out the ground with something?
Yeah, you can add water. You can thin it out with water.
Okay.
You can even add other mediums, but the problem with that is you would change the absorbency. So that's something to think about. You know, if you, thinning it out with water is absolutely fine. You really aren't going to see a problem with the acrylic paint thinned out with water.
Cool. We do have a few more questions coming
Yeah, go
in.
ahead while I'm painting. That'd be great.
Awesome. Perfect. So Carmen is asking, so of the last two of the
Mm-hmm.
grounds,
Mm-hmm.
which ground is best for creating 3D texture to paint on?
Oh, they both work great. Let me open both containers and swipe them out to show you. You can keep painting if you want. So you see that I have, this was the cold press ground that we just had. And if I had a stencil, I could just knife it over, lift it up and have a texture. I can use my palette knife and have a texture. And when this dries, I can paint right on top of this with my watercolor and it's fine. Light dimensional ground is the same in that it is very thick, but it feels really different. If you had the wet product with you, you would notice right away that it's light. It's actually, it's like frosting. It's got this really light texture. Literally, it was developed so that folks that did really, really large paintings would not have heavy canvases. And this is a product that's very similar to what we call light molding paste in our golden line. So if you don't have the QoR Grounds available, you can buy light molding paste and it'll do the same exact thing. The watercolor, the cold press ground, is basically about the same as our fiber paste in the golden line, except this has titanium white in it to make a nice bright ground. And it's slightly different, but if you didn't have, I mean, with Plaza, you'll be able to get this online, so it's not a problem. But if you popped into a Plaza store and you were having a moment where you wanted to get it and for some reason it wasn't there, you could still paint on the fiber paste. It just wouldn't be as bright. Okay, so you see how thick that is? Both of these, they can stay that thick, or they can be spread out very, very flat and thin. And you can see with that light dimensional ground, Todd, how close can you get in here with this one? There you go. How absolutely flat I can get that. This could be, almost super smooth if I wanted to. So this is, these would be the two options for texture for watercolor. And guess what? You can mix them. With all of our golden products, our acrylic products, you can mix them. And since these are both absorbent enough for watercolor, you're not affecting the absorbency. So if you had, you wanted a texture that was somewhere in between, you can do that. All right, is the mind blown yet? Are there more questions? That was fun.
Yes.
Oh, keep
Um, Kirsten is asking, why is it called acrylic ground if it's for watercolor painting?
because it's made with acrylics. That's why. I mean, it's truth in advertising, right? So this, and it goes completely against the logic that you might have that, acrylics and watercolor don't really mix. It's more about what the watercolor can key into. You have a weak binder in watercolor, which is why you can reactivate watercolor. It's one of the great things about it, but the binder's not like a permanent glue. It needs certain things to adhere. It needs that toothiness, that absorbency like you have in a watercolor paper. But you also have that in some acrylics. Some things can be added to acrylic to give it those characteristics so that the watercolor can key into it. And that's why these acrylics work. And the neat thing about this is that because it is acrylic, you now have a foundational layer that can be put onto canvas or panel or even plexiglass or dye bond or I don't know, keep going with your imagination. Where does acrylic stick? Something that maybe watercolor would not have been so easy to use on, those surfaces without that layer historically now can be put in those contexts because of the acrylic foundation that has that absorbency and texture that the watercolor can key into. Does that make sense? Okay.
Um,
Good
does the
questions.
ground, yeah, does the ground need to be dried before applying color?
Oh, yes. You'll be much happier if your ground is applied if it's dry before you apply color. I will say that you're not going to break the ground if you put watercolor into an acrylic. Um, it's not going to make the paint broken. You're just not going to have a very nice experience. So you want to let it dry completely before you paint on it, and then you'll have the best experience. If you did want to slightly change the color of the ground, you have to not put too much acrylic paint or you'll change the absorbency. But if you wanted to put a drop of color into the ground and kind of create like a light colored ground, like say an off-white or a really light pink, you can totally do that. Just that teeny bit, especially golden, we put so much pigment in our paint that, a little teeny drop would probably change it enough for you to have a tinted ground. You just don't want to go in with a lot of glossy acrylic paint because it'll change that absorbency ratio. But you can put acrylic paint in your acrylic ground and change that color. So that's another opportunity if you think of it that way. Mm-hmm.
And how long would it take for a thin layer of it to dry?
It depends on what it's on. So if I scraped a thin layer, say with like a Bondo scraper or a squeegee onto a piece of raw canvas, it'll be touch dry in a few minutes. But if you're putting a thicker layer, say on a non-absorbent surface like plexiglass, it might have to dry overnight. And it also depends on your environment. If you're in Florida, where I'm from, it's very humid a lot of the year. And then, other areas are quite dry, and that will definitely affect your dry times as well. So it's variable. Yeah.
Can you sand it to smooth it
You
after it's dry?
can. Yeah, you absolutely can. So if you knife it on and you wet sand it, you can get a smoother surface. But there is a point in wet sanding where if you get it so smooth, you no longer have the surface that your watercolor can key into. It becomes less absorbent because you close all the pores. So if you're wet sanding, just do a few passes and test a little corner. Maybe you can wipe it off. And just see, okay, am I happy with this texture and does it still grab my paint? We had Mark Golden, who's our founder, still works here with us. He was really promoting wet sanding and brought in some examples for the team, and we were all just just amazed at how beautifully smooth these surfaces are. But then there were a few panels where we got so smooth that the paint wouldn't stick. So, and it was with the watercolor grounds. We're like, okay, there is a point where it's too much. So, yeah. So, do you have more questions while we paint?
Yes. Yeah, they're coming in.
Keep them coming.
It's Jane is asking if you can frame it with glass.
Ooh, you're setting me up for something that I have to show you. So yes, you can. Matter of fact, I did something to as an example for you guys. Let me push this aside. I just took one of those little cards. Again, this is not, I'm not meant to be art per se, but an example. Once you've painted on any of these grounds or even on paper, to be honest, you can totally frame them like you would an acrylic painting or an oil painting. One thing you would want to maybe consider is varnishing them. If you varnish a watercolor, you can't go back and work on it again. It's a permanent layer, but it does make it, it does protect the watercolor painting. It makes it impervious to water. So if I were to take this dirty, I'm going to do this on purpose, my dirty water, and put it on this little watercolor painting. This is on the ground. So you saw how easy that paint came off the ground before, right? That didn't come off at all because I've sprayed it with our archival MSA varnish. It's the stinky stuff. You do it outside, but it's just a couple of layers. We have videos on our website and articles and all that about how to varnish watercolor paintings. But if you do that, now this is really locked in. You don't need glass. You can totally frame it like it is. If it's on a canvas, you can just hang it on the wall, and then you don't have to worry about, any moisture damaging your watercolor painting. And there's some artists that, work this way and professionally, and there's some that prefer not to, and it's just a personal choice. But you have choices, which is really exciting. So that is an option. And I just, this was just a demo. I picked this up at the thrift store and just popped it in there for you guys just to give you that example. So thanks for the setup. This one is also varnished as well. So even if you're getting quite textural, if you can completely, varnish. And I do encourage you, if you're interested in that, to read the article that we have and on our Just Paint blog. And if you can find our video on our website, that would be helpful as well. It's a creative choice, when you varnish, it does change the painting a little bit. And if you are very sensitive to that texture of the surface of the watercolor paper and the pigment, and you don't want that to change, you may want to do some tests before you commit to your artwork. And that's good practice anyway, because it takes, a little bit of practice to really get that varnish down evenly, but it's not that hard. It's a neat option. Yeah. I want to do that wash, and I can answer questions while I do it.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Can you use golden gel matte for acrylic? I guess as a ground for watercolor.
The matte medium,
That
in
sounds like that would be what it is.
yeah, the matte medium, even though it's matte, it's a good line of thought, but I would say no. You're thinking the right way though, because the matte has a little bit of texture, and that texture is going to give, because of the matting solids, it would help key in, right? We talked about that, but it's not enough. It's not enough. Gesso, however, you can watercolor on regular gesso. And all of these look a little different. And we didn't just come out with our regular gesso as a watercolor ground because we wanted it to have a little bit more absorbency, but people do it all the time. It's just different. It just looks different. So if you have acrylic products, we always encourage people to test. So, if you have acrylic products, you should probably just like scrape a few out on a scrap piece of paper, let them dry and see, you've got the paint and just take some watercolor and try it out. And you'll see the successes and failures and start to understand what the acrylics need to work right to work appropriately for watercolor. And we did, a lot of tests before we landed on these three as being what we thought were good options. All right, here we go. I have a loaded brush and I'm going in for a glaze. I'm going to go right through the middle here. Now, I don't want to rework that. I'm going to let it sit. Actually, I need more water. And we'll see if this starts to run. So far, so good. And here I wasn't very even. If I wanted to go in and scrub that, then I might actually start to see a little lift. Not too bad on the second pass. Let's push it. Now, I expect lift now. There, I'm lifting a little now, which might be a good thing because that area was really dark. Let's do it one more time. I'm going to get more water. Now this time with more water, water actually acts also as a solvent. So if you imagine I'm doing, this is going to act like a solvent. Now this is probably going to lift it up. I've gone over this, what, 4 times now? 4 or 5 times? Still pretty good, but I'm seeing it start to pool and lift. If I go again, well, I still have an image there. I've gone a bunch of times. Oh, there we go. Now we're starting to see some fading. Does that answer your question regarding the glazing? Hopefully. Get a sense of it. There you go. So here I just had one pass, and then more diluted as I went so you could see beneath. And, there might be, now these are both, this is a staining color, and then this is also a staining color beneath. So you might see a little bleed if there's a lot of water, like I had, right? You see that edge? That shows me that there's a little bit of bleed. But it's not paper. It's going to behave a little differently. You can glaze, it just looks different. And it can be really beautiful. It's just different. Okay. I also said I would glaze this one. This is a totally different texture. And then I think we'll be almost done, right?
Yeah, so there are a few more questions
Oh
and we'll
yeah, go
try to
ahead,
get
ask.
through a couple more.
Yeah.
But also like after the event, if we don't get to your question or if you come up with other ones, they can email help@goldenpaints.
You absolutely got that
Okay.
right. Help at
All right, cool.
goldenpaints.com. That's right. There you
Perfect.
go. Thanks,
Yeah.
Scott. I said Scott, Todd. Scott's one of our former material and application specialists here at Golden who answer help at Golden Paints inquiries. All right, there's that
Perfect.
glaze on the cold press ground. All right, so you can put the overhead on. I'll just answer questions. I think we're set. Hopefully
Cool.
that was
Yeah, and
informative.
in a couple minutes, we'll also do a little show and tell. We'll invite them. We'll
Oh,
invite everyone to share what they made on screen. So just a couple more
exciting.
questions, and then we'll do that, and then maybe we can ask some things while we're sharing. Um,
Wonderful.
so will drying with a hair dryer have a negative effect?
No. Mm-mm. With what? The acrylic or the watercolor? I think, okay, I'll just answer that for both. With watercolor, no, just know that, that pressure of the air can move things. But if you're aware of that, there should be no problem with using the heat and the air to dry your watercolor. With your acrylic grounds, if it's on, sometimes with acrylics, if you force dry is what it's called, the acrylic by using a hair dryer, if you have a thick enough layer, where your top layer dries very quickly and the bottom layer stays wet, sometimes that layer will separate and look like a crack. It's not really a crack. It's called a craze. We even have an article on that. What's a crack and a craze? A crack is when it goes all the way through. That's a different problem, but a craze is where that film just kind of separates, because if you can imagine, if it's dried really quickly on the top and the bottom is still wet, that moisture is trying to get out somehow. It's got to evaporate out of that film. And sometimes that tight layer on the top with that moving wet layer that wants to come out, that water wants to come out of, is underneath, that you'll just have it split. And that little split is called a craze. So you might see that if you're in a dry environment and using a hair dryer on a thicker layer. Generally speaking, it's fine. Okay.
Great. So this is the last question I ask here before we go into show and tell. Suja is asking, since a UPO is plastic, can we apply the ground to that?
So yes, you can. I'll say that we have found that acrylics have a little bit better adhesion to some of the graphics Duralar products. No offense to Legion, just know that we recommend you do test. But if you're not scratching at it and it's not in a high traffic area, then you should be fine. Okay.
Awesome.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So I've led up to this and we'd love to see your work. So everyone, if you want to share what you created today while following along with Stacy today, please share your screen. You can change your view to gallery view so you can see everyone else's stuff. So please go ahead and share what you made. We love to see all the different colors and creations. So I see
Nice.
Carmen's, awesome, Adriana, Anne, awesome, Kirsten.
Thanks,
Oh,
Todd.
so cool. Betsy,
Those
yours
are
looks like a
lovely.
beautiful landscape.
Was it fun?
Thumbs up,
Was
thumbs
it
up.
relaxing? That's wonderful.
Oh, I love it.
Great.
While we're sharing too, someone asked if there are workshops offered at the New York
Oh,
studio.
that's a great question. I mean, sometimes we do. If we have groups that come and do a tour, our materials and applications team will, we can organize that. And we do also offer some virtual online workshops as well, because we understand not everyone can come to Central New York. So if you're really interested in that, you can drop us an email and we'll be happy to give you more information. Yeah. And if you
Great,
don't know where to go for those questions, you can email us at help@goldenpaints.com and we'll make sure you get to the right people. Okay.
great. Last one, I did miss this one. What
Yes.
surface was the textured piece done on?
The texture, well, we had a few textured pieces. So if you go to the overhead, Todd, I'll just show you all of them, since this one is light dimensional ground. That's the most textured piece that I showed. And it's just put on like, frosting and then watercolored. And this one was actually varnished. Oh, the substrate, is that what the question was?
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
the substrate. Yeah, great question. This is, I think, an ampersand panel. That's what that is. Yeah. Yep. And those work great for any of the grounds. Yeah. Whether you put it on thick
And
or thin. Mm-hmm.
for the ground samples, were they on the Hanamiel paper as well?
No, these are on just the, cheap little chipboard.
Okay,
Yeah, just a little, these are actually designed, when we do these, they're designed to be just, test panels.
cool.
Not a permanent thing, they said, just watch out.
Awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
Great. This was amazing. It's always fun to see the color mixing. I do find that satisfying as well. Thank you so much, Stacy, for being with us
Oh, my
again
pleasure.
from New York, and we look forward to the next one with you. Hope everyone had a great time. Have a
Thanks
good
for
one,
doing it.
everyone.
Take care. Bye.